And what the Pel is up, everybody? This is Pelicans Plus with Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter. This episode is brought to you by Hornitos. Hornitos is the official tequila of Pelicans Plus and Boot Crew Media. Make sure you're subscribing, following, all that wherever you happen to be listening to this podcast. Today, you may notice a friendly new face over to my right on the screen. We're joined by Brian Geisinger of the Buzz Beat Pod. Very excited about this one today. Also, Sports Channel 8 and ACC Sports Journal. So we may be talking a little bit about Trey Murphy as well, not just Devonte Graham. This will be a fun one. Brian, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, all things considered, this has not been like the best of week in like a lot of regions of the country, but I'm doing pretty well, and I'm sort of enjoying a little bit of a lull in the basketball calendar, but excited to talk off season with you.
For sure. How are things up there? You're in the Carolinas, right?
Yeah. So, no natural disasters here, but obviously, I've been thinking about people down in Louisiana this week and just seeing what happened in like the New York City, Philadelphia, other parts of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast this week too. Man, just some scary storms. So, I hope everyone listening to this is doing all right, because it's been not ideal.
It has been ugly over this last week or so. And I have not been super active on Twitter because of that. And I want to make sure everybody's okay. But today what we're doing is providing hopefully a little bit of an escape for those of you in Louisiana. And our thoughts are with you. Our prayers are with you. And we love you. At least I can say I love you in Louisiana, Ryan. You don't have to say, you love people yet.
No, if I really wanted to go to New Orleans this fall, but I'm actually I've never been, but I'm going to put some of my travel plans on hold. So 2022, New Orleans, let's do it. All right.
All right.
So I'm in the feel out phase, but I want to love down there. But no, I do hope everyone is doing okay as well as they possibly could be doing at this point.
There you go. Exactly. So, Brian, we're joining you, or you're joining us today to talk a little bit about Devonte Graham, but you cover the Hornets. And as we do when we have somebody on from another team, how are you feeling about your Hornets going into this coming season? Obviously, LaMelo Ball is the guy there, and made 4 draft picks in this last draft. JT Thor, Kai Jones. Book Knight was a really big one that he fell to the Hornets. How are you feeling about your team into this coming season?
Interesting. I think I am actually a little bit lower. And I think I can speak for the Buzz Beat podcast with my co-host Spencer Percy, Richie Randall, Lee Branscombe, all 4 of us on there. I think are sort of like a little lower on how the offseason went for Charlotte than maybe even some of sort of like the national consensus. Like I think Zach Lowe was pretty praised what they did. They clearly have gone in a different direction since they drafted LaMelo last November. I mean, less than a year ago. So this is happening over the span of basically like 9-10 months. But, they're going all in on LaMelo as mega creator, right? And you're going to surround him with shooters, play finishers, and athletes that have some, secondary creation. And I thought the Mason Plumlee trade the night of the draft was like, okay, you absorb him into your cap space. And you get to move up 20 spots in the draft. That allows you to take JT Thor, who's a prospect I really liked. I don't think you'll see much of JT this year in Charlotte. My guess is that he'll be featured prominently with the Greensboro Swarm, the G League affiliate. And I really like Thor as like a draft and stash guy, domestic version of that essentially. And I really like him as a prospect. And I thought his flashes in Vegas were good. But you add Plumlee, that helps. You needed to pick up something at center, but it also chipped away at some of your cap space, right? And so one of the going into the offseason, I was sort of hoping Charlotte, they could have gotten north of $20 million worth of cap space if they had renounced the cap hold to Malik Monk, which they ended up doing. He had like a $16, $18 million cap hold. I really like Monk as a player. I hope he gets a shot with LA. I think he's quite talented, and I think he fit well with LaMelo. I would have loved to have seen more of them together this year and really going forward, but didn't seem like that was in the cards. I don't know. I just thought they would have been better served by bringing back Devonte Graham, who I quite like, and we can talk about trying to sign someone like Rashawn Holmes in free agency, and maybe that option just like wasn't available. And if you go below that, like the secondary market for for free agent centers wasn't that great. But I just thought you could have thrown more money at him than Sacramento was offering. You trade a potential, future first, pretty heavily protected to get back in the first round to New York to draft Kai Jones at 19. I don't dislike Kai as a prospect, but he's going to take a little bit of time for development. Like, I don't know how much he'll drive winning for them this season or contribute to winning. And like for right now, they seem to be working towards making the playoffs, even though I really don't think they're sort of above 9 or 10 in the Eastern Conference. The Terry Rozier extension was a lot. Now you're looking at, I believe it's $115 million over the next 5 seasons for Rozier. The extension was 97 over 4, which is the most they could have offered him in terms of years, in terms of dollar amount. Terry has been very good in Charlotte. He was a nice asset for them or player for them to grab in a sign and trade when Kemba was leaving 2 years ago. And he's played well. He's earned this money. I'm like happy for Terry, right? But you're paying Rozier to be like an elite 2 guard now, right? Uh-huh. And Terry is a dynamic 3-point shooter, a movement shooter, a guy that you can run off pin downs, run off flares. There's a lot of great ways you can feature him in your offense, but he had probably an outlier shooting season from mid-range last year. He doesn't really get to the rim. He's constantly, making poor rotations or mistakes defensively. If the shooting fell off, there's really no sort of like answer other spots for him to like pick up value. And you lost 2 key secondary ball handlers in Malik Monk and Devonte Graham. And so it is going to be so contingent on LaMelo and Gordon Hayward, but really LaMelo is the primary creator for this team to continuously drum up advantage, put teams in rotation. And if he's going to do that, and look, LaMelo is awesome. I thought he was the number 1 prospect before the 2020 draft. He was superb his rookie year, but he can get to the rim, but he's not a great rim finisher. So is he going to get stronger this offseason? The pull-up 3 was really good last season before the wrist injury. When he came back, the pull-up 3 was gone. And, I mean, LaMelo's got to be – like, he's going to have to hit pull-up 3s at like a 35, 36, 38% clip next season, because he can't let teams go under that screen, under the ball screen action. Because if they do, that's just going to gum up everything for Charlotte's offense. So, like, I kind of also – but going forward, I obviously am intrigued by what they're building around LaMelo. They had a busy offseason. I don't love everything they did. The Oubre signing is fine. Good athlete, good contract. In losing Devonte stinks, but at least you'll get it. Probably maybe you'll get a first round pick out of it. But it could also very well be conveyed as 2 seconds. So at least you got something for that. But just losing Graham, losing Monk, losing Cody Zeller, I don't know. That's a lot. So I don't know. I'll let you jump in and maybe give your thoughts here on the Hornets or push it along. I don't know. If I had to like give the offseason a letter grade, I would say like C-, C. I think they got, at least in terms of like next season, marginally worse. Long term, I think that's still up in the air. We'll see what happens with Kai and JT. But I just think the East got better overall and they got a little worse. So like I think they're going to be gunning for a play-in spot at best next year.
It was an interesting mix of going for the future with adding JT Thor and Kai Jones, and to a degree, Book Knight, who will be a scorer in this league.
Yeah.
But then also adding Plumlee and Kelly Oubre. It's just this weird hybrid. It's like what the Pelicans did last year.
It's great if you can do you can sort of like build out in 2 directions too, right? It's not easy to do that. You can do it. The Celtics a couple of years ago were able to do it when they owned so many other teams' draft picks. And I guess that's kind of what New Orleans was doing. Yeah. Hey, man, I could go for a couple Hornito shots as well, too. But you can do that. You can sort of like build for the future and contend now if you've got really good young players and just like you control the draft picks from another team, right? So Boston never really cashed in on this, but you can kind of wear sort of two different shoes at the same time. I think it's harder to do that if you don't have like a surplus of like draft picks. Right now, Charlotte controls all of their stuff for the most part, but it's sort of hard to do that. And prior to the Oubre signing, and certainly prior to like the Rozier extension, it looked for a second like they were maybe taking a step back. Outside of like the presence of Gordon Hayward on the roster, it was like, wow, they're so young. Like Rozier's expiring, they could trade him at the deadline. Like all of this stuff, it was like, wow, are they gonna like just take a step back, add some stuff around LaMelo, then build out? But you extend Rozier, you add Oubre, and it seems it seems still like no. They do want in fact gun for the playoffs. But they've tried to do so while also like protecting the future as much as possible. I don't love everything they've done, but I think the process in some spaces has been pretty good too.
I'm interested to see how they shake out for sure. The last season, definitely one of the more fun teams to watch, a league pass team for sure. But transitioning here to talk about Devonte Graham, we've heard the volume shooting has been a big thing. That's something that made me very wary going into the addition of Graham and the rumors around him. And a lot of people felt that way too. I was like, and like the field goal percentage is just it's atrocious. That's what made me worry more than anything. But he's a volume shooter from three. Shot 37.5% from behind the arc last year. When you look at the type of shots that he took last year, is it off the dribble? Is it catch and shoot? Is it off pin downs like you just mentioned with Terry Rozier? What kind of shooter is he?
He's a super versatile 3-point shooter. The thing that I'll say about Devonte is a point guard that doesn't really get to the rim. He can't finish at the rim, and he's weirdly like not a very good like mid-range player. Despite those things, he's an awesome offensive player, and it's because he really is like one of the more underrated 3-point bombers in the NBA, both off the dribble and off the catch. 2 seasons ago in 2019, 2020, he sort of kind of came out of nowhere. Like he came off the bench to start that season, year one without Kemba. It was his second year in the NBA, lightly used as a rookie. Rozier was brought in to be the starting point guard. And within the first week of the season, it was obvious that Devonte had made a big jump as a pull-up shooter. And you can pull up his like pick and roll numbers from the 2019-2020 season, like pretty efficient. But in terms of volume, like, man, really was like in sort of like elite company as far as guys that were using X number of pick and roll possessions and scoring X number of points per possession. He was pretty good and really like had to take tough shots, which probably, knocked down the 3-point percentage a little bit. And then this season with just like more playmakers in the door, like the presence of LaMelo, Rozier's got to have the ball. Hayward's in, he's got to have the ball. Monk became an important player for them. And so Devonte shifted, like played with the ball plenty, but shifted to off the ball as well. And like, you can do stuff with him. I'm going to be fascinated to see like how they integrate he and Zion together. I think there's a lot of ways you can unlock those two together. Like the shooting gravity of Devonte is great for Zion to play underneath and inside of all of that. But like any of those inverted pick and roll actions they use with Zion, where he's the ball handler and you have a guard screen for him, maybe it was JJ Redick in the past or Josh Hart or something. Well, you can do that with Devonte now, and he'll be great at it. Total team first guy, great passer, good vision, great transition passer. And I believe he finished the season in the NBA. I could double check this, but finished second in the NBA this year in spot up efficiency. So like he's a big time catch and shoot guy. He's got the pull-up game, regressed a little bit this year, but it's there. And when Rozier missed time for stretches this year, Charlotte moved Devonte to more of like an off-ball combo role and started running him off screens and running him off pin downs and using these sets and these actions that they run for Rozier after timeouts or whatever and putting Devonte in that role. And he can totally do that too. So he's a guy that just strikes fear, or should at least, in opposing defenses, but he does basically everything from like 25 feet from the basket. He's a weird player, but he's really impactful And he's so good on that side of the court. It makes up for the fact that he's probably a negative defender.
We're going to get to that for sure. The issue for a lot of last season was that Eric Bledsoe did not make 3-point shots. Steven Adams clogged things up, and there just weren't a lot of 3-point shooters on this team. If you count Nah as a 3-point shooter, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which I would, percentages might not indicate as such, but he really progressed last season. Some people are talking about him as a most improved player candidate coming into the coming season. By the sounds of it, Devonte will have at least the opportunity to come in and really, really open things up for Zion and Brandon Ingram going into this season.
Yeah, he does, because he doesn't need the basketball too. Like that's a great thing. He's an excellent relocator guy. Like even when you're not running him off screens, he's really, really good at if someone's drawing two or weak side defender digs or turns his back or whatever. Devontae's really good at just sliding 5-10 feet left or right, just making himself available for a catch and shoot. So when you have gravity guys like Zion and BI that demand extra attention, Zion is amazing, right? Like he's just the most unstoppable force in like all of North American sports. And Brandon Ingram is I know the fit isn't perfect, but BI is a stud. And so just you have those two guys to draw gravity. Graham's going to be, at least offensively, I do worry about the defense, but I love what he can do for them offensively, because he can help set those guys up and make their lives easier, but he doesn't need the basketball. He can space the court, and he'll just do whatever you ask him to do. So, I think he's a perfect fit. You can drop him on basically any roster. He's just going to make the offense better.
And, a lot of the narrative around the Pelicans, especially in the national media, which we don't like a lot of, it's just generally bad when covering the Pelicans. But a lot of the narrative around them is, oh, their offense was so good last year and the defense was just atrocious. Second half of the season, they were top 10 in defense. Change up in personnel, but also the fact that they have a different head coach may result in some different things. But who knows about what's going on with Jackson Hayes, and he's obviously a very, very talented center and athletic, and he's learned a lot over this last year. But anyway, the opportunity that Devonte has to really impact the offense is needed. I mean, it just is. The space was not there. But in terms of, since you brought it up a couple times, we'll talk about the defense, and then we'll get to a couple other questions that I have. How much of a negative is he defensively? I mean, he's an undersized guard. That's going to be a disadvantage for him.
He's undersized and he's not super quick, right? So it's not even you can just put him on the basketball and Eric Bledsoe could really get in a stance and be disruptive at the point of attack. Devonte doesn't.
He could. He didn't.
He didn't. Yeah. I mean, again, when he was in Milwaukee, right? Those were in. Obviously he was very good in Milwaukee's pick and roll defensive scheme when Bud got there those first two seasons. But the one thing I will say with Devonte is that his the issues he has on defense aren't for a lack of feel or sort of knowing where he needs to be, or a lack of effort or anything like that. He's a very clever player, and tries hard, right? Is about winning. So even if there are going to be issues with him, there are going to be some nights where just the matchup is bad, he's going to get beat up. Guarding pick and roll, he'll have his issues there. I guess maybe it'll depend on who he's working in those combinations with, but he played a lot of zone in Charlotte this year too, so maybe there's a little added versatility that way. He's got a little bit of understanding with that, and again, he'll try and do whatever you ask of him. But as a one-on-one individual defender, he's not good. And the one thing that will be interesting to see is Charlotte's defensive rotations. Zone, man-to-man, all that stuff were pretty bad, across the board last year. And so, how much of that was just the product of the team, or was it, Devonte himself? Because you had a lot of guys that sort of struggled with those responsibilities at time. As I mentioned, Rozier is pretty bad at that stuff. So I don't know. He's not going to be good on that end, but I don't think it's going to be every night you're going to be like banging your head against the TV screen, wondering like, oh, Devonte's getting abused again. I don't think it's quite as like overt as that, but obviously like his value is, you know, he's a DH in terms of like providing value. He's significantly better on the offensive side of the floor.
Okay. And for reminder, for those of you who are listening, feel free to drop a comment, ask any questions regarding Devonte Graham that I don't hit or that you've been curious about for a while. So in terms of, you mentioned him being a team first guy. He went from being in the starting lineup to being a sixth man off the bench, sort of a scoring punch. What role fit him better? Looking at the Pelicans roster and what they have available going into this season, do you think he should start at the one? Do you think he'd be better off, or he would serve the Pelicans better being with that second unit and being a primary scorer there?
So I think like independent of team, the role Graham is like best served for is like bench gunner, right? Like come off the bench. He can absolutely run a second unit. And like, I think you can close games with him too. Like he's that good of an offensive player. One of the reasons why like Charlotte, I think ultimately Charlotte had a magic number in mind where they were like, oh, well, we would resign this guy at this kind of number. And, you know, New Orleans was willing to offer, you know, a little bit more than that or way more than that. I mean, I don't know what that number was. The one thing, and maybe Charlotte said, look, if we have LaMelo, we can't pay but X number of dollars per year for like a backup or whatever. And ultimately, like, I do think Devonte is like best served as that. He's probably like a top, if he was a starting point guard, he'd be like a top 25 guy, somewhere in that range, maybe. But as a guy that you bring off the bench and you just use him to augment and improve your offense, he's perfect. Like, so I think you can start him. It's not a disaster to start him. I think he's probably played well enough to be a starting guard in the NBA. But like, where do I think Devonte is best served? It's like propping up a second unit, maybe closing a game out, just being a shot in the arm and a guy that can sort of like right the ship if like the starters get off to a bad start, or, you know, you're getting into some of these mixed lineups with starters and bench. Like Devontae's perfect with that. You want him to play a lot with Zion, I would imagine, to help unlock the offense. So he's versatile. I think he can be a guy that you can come in and play with NAW. And I think those guys can like play off one another. And I think there's some like interesting synergy you can get there because Devonte is a good passer and the pull-up shooting gravity and the spot-up efficiency. But I do think like his best role is like stud bench player, like very good bench guard. But if you're at that level, I don't think it's like a crime to be a starter. I think you can be fine in that capacity as well.
Sure, and I love the point that you make in terms of him being just a shot in the arm. That's a great analogy, and a lot of people in Pel's Twitter feel that way about him coming off the bench. The issue for me is who's the primary ball handler if he's coming off the bench, because it'll have Zion. To be. I mean, right? And like. Yeah. Point Zion is great in spurts. Mm-hmm. It's great in spurts because it throws off the defense. They just don't know what to do with it. And then there's Brandon Ingram, who can create his own shot, but feels, I mean, it's as if Stan Van Gundy said, every time you have the ball in your hands and you start dribbling, create your own shot and just tell everybody to go away. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker can be, I mean, he can be good enough. Let's say that as a ball handler, but again, another guy that you don't want him to have the ball in his hands to start every possession. Yeah. So it's just about who you have in that starting lineup, and I think it'd be really fun to put. No, I mean, it'd be interesting, maybe not fun because depending on the outcome, but not at the 1, BI at the 2, Zion at the 3, Trey Murphy at the 4, and Jonas at the 5. There's a lot of different options that the Pelicans have, and luckily it's an 82-game season, and Willie Green has a lot of time to figure it out. But I don't think it's necessarily a lose-lose or a win-win, but it could go either way.
Yeah, I kind of like the wing rotation for New Orleans, right? Like Satoransky's a good decision maker. Hart's just awesome. Like he's just like built to be like a rotation guy on a playoff team, right? Because he makes threes and he defends and rebounds. And And I mean, I really like Trey Murphy as a prospect, and he was awesome in Vegas. Like just to state the complete obvious, he was phenomenal in summer league.
Najee Marshall, and the recently drafted Herb Jones.
Loved Marshall coming out of Xavier. Phenomenal passer. Like everyone who follows the Pelicans knows, he had a nice rookie season and he was good in summer league. And just Herb Jones is just like a fun piece that you get to like move around the court. Was one of the best defensive prospects, heading into the draft the last couple of years. Cutter, smart player, can pass. Like you can do some fun stuff. Yeah,
athlete. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be cool to see what you can do with he and Zion. But yeah, I really liked Najee Marshall, and I'm glad that he got a shot to run with the Pelicans last year, that he like kind of made the most of it. I think he's a rotation player in the NBA. And I'm hopeful that year two for him is productive as well.
So again, to reference the team first notion about Devonte, would you classify him as a leader?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would, definitely. And I mean, it was a little different in Charlotte because that was like a younger roster, And I mean, I guess the Pelicans, I would say they're pretty young as well, seemingly. So no, do I think he's a leader? Like hell yeah, I definitely do. He is a guy that whether he's in street clothes or whatever on the bench, he's going to be the first guy up to celebrate a big play. Has taken whatever Charlotte on like a monthly basis over 3 years was giving him a different role, and he just happily took whatever you offered from him. No, I do, and I think Charlotte's going to miss his like steadying presence, and along with the pull up shooting and then the 3-point, just like the spot up shooting, more than maybe even some people that really follow the team closely are going to understand. But everyone who followed this team, covered this team, was a fan, whatever, loved Devonte's spirit. He is like a vibes guy, and so I do think
vibes are immaculate.
They are like with Devonte, the vibes are very good. And like, do I think that matters over the course of a 6-month season? Like, yeah, I do. I think it does. So yeah, like he's a perfect locker room guy to throw into because he's going to get along and just do whatever you ask of him. But like, I do think he can be a leader. I think he got a lot of that from the one season playing with Kemba.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. And having that is definitely a positive, having that in his back pocket. Mm-hmm. And to reference those additions again last year, a big push for me when, the Pelicans were talking about adding Kyle Lowry was, well, everybody was saying he'd come in and bring leadership. And I had one person in a room say, wasn't that what everybody said about Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams? Well, the dude's actually been a leader before. Like it's not in theory. And that's great stuff to hear about Graham too, because, there were just times where the Pels just looked dead in the water. And that, I mean, Ingram, it's kind of a consensus on Pels Twitter that he just quit and stopped trying on defense because of his relationship with Stan Van Gundy. So who knows?
The Wells seemed. I watched a lot of Pelicans games because of Zion, who I covered when he was at Duke, and obviously love him. He's amazing. But the Wells seemed like a little poisoned at times. Certainly like late in the year for New Orleans, with specific to like Van Gundy and Bi.
I'm kind of my niche in Pels Twitter and in the podcast sphere is just to calm the waters. And I was like, we can all freak out and say Stan Van Gundy's going to get fired this offseason. Let's just calm down. And I was so wrong. I was so wrong. Hey, they brought in Willie Green, and I love Willie Green.
It seemed like a good hire. It does.
Yeah, and just the way he's been with the team and the little clips that we've got to see during the summer league, and he is just a player's coach, but also commands respect, and that's just what you need in the NBA to really be effective. Lastly, before we let you go, do you think that the Pelicans are getting their value for their money? They shipped out in sign and trade Lonzo Ball, who got that 4 years, $85 million, I think, with the Bulls, whereas the addition of Graham is 4 years, $47. So you're saving a ton of money for a guy who's probably going to be more consistent from behind the 3-point line. Defense won't be there as much is for Lonzo or was for Lonzo, although he is an off-ball defender more than on-ball, not a point-of-attack guy. Mm. But anyway, is the value for the money there when you're looking at Devonte? And would you have been happy bringing him back on a contract like that?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, I was sort of hoping Charlotte could have, and this was obviously wishful thinking, I sort of thought maybe the model was like what Denver got Monte Morris on, which was like 28 over 3 years. And I was sort of thinking like that's an elite backup point guard that can play with the starters, can fill in for Murray when Murray's not. And so I thought, wow, could you get him at that, right? Could you get him at, in that $8 to $9 to $10 million range? He goes for a little bit above that. But yeah, no, I wouldn't have any. If Charlotte had brought Devonte back at this number, I wouldn't have had any issues with it. Again, he's a really good. He's like, again, you're going to see it more like on hand this year. Again, he doesn't get to the rim. He can't finish at the rim. The mid-range game is like kind of a mess, but he has leveraged the power of the three to unlock the spot-up game, the pull-up game, and the passing that comes off that gravity. So, but yeah, I would have been totally fine with him at that number. It's a that is a reasonable number. Like, I'll be honest, I didn't love the Pelicans off season in general, but I think in a vacuum, I love Valanciunas. He was awesome this past year. I love Devonte Graham. He's been a phenomenal offensive player for 2 years now. He's not like a fluke. He's really good on that side of the court. And 2 seasons ago, Satoransky was the only good decision maker Chicago had in the backcourt. So, I think ultimately they did okay. I mean, I know they've been getting filleted by a lot of some of the national columnists and talking heads, but I'll be fascinated to see how it actually manifests on the court. I do think there's some really cool things you can do with Devonte and Zion, and I'm fascinated to see how Willie Green looks to unlock that. I think they'll miss Lonzo. He's good. He's a good two-way player, but I think there's enough here that it's not inconceivable. This could be a playoff team. I mean, I want them to be a playoff team because if they are, then the Devonte Graham trade that conveys to a first round pick. So it could be a win-win here actually. So let's go. But I like Devonte. There's also there's cool North Carolina ties to this roster. Zion played at Duke. Trey Murphy's from Durham. I live in Raleigh. Devonte Graham's from Raleigh. So we like those. We like the local ties in North Carolina that are on the Pelicans too.
Right, absolutely. And speaking of Murphy, you had mentioned this before we started the pod. I'll just ask you one quick question, then we'll let you go. I want to be respectful of your time. But you said you watched a lot of Trey Murphy. You said he's from Durham, played in Virginia this last season. Is the summer league performance legit? Is the hype around him legit? That 50, 40, 90 shooting, the defense, his length, he may very well grow a little bit more. I mean, he's just 21. So yeah. Is the hype surrounding Trey Murphy legitimate? Is it warranted? I
think so. And I mean, he grew in college. That was one of the reasons why he was at Rice to begin with and not, he transfers to Virginia. It's crazy how quickly this all happened. This time a year ago, September 2020, the plan for a period of time was to have Trey Murphy redshirt last year at UVA. Yep. And he gets declared eligible a week before the season in November, basically. And he starts that first game and it was just phenomenal. I know Trey has he could get stronger, which would help out the defense a lot. But I thought his defense in college was pretty good. It looked way better in summer league against better competition, super encouraging. And his actual shot is a little weird, the form, but if it goes in 40 whatever % of the time, who gives a rip? I think he's got I think there were flashes of an in-between game, curling off pin downs, shooting runners, didn't see a lot of it, but he's got a good shooting stroke. And he is a violent cutter without the basketball too, which Virginia really tapped into by just having, they'd run a lot of these spread ball screen actions, pick and pop. And then when the weak side defense would bend to Jay Huff on the pick and pop, Murphy would just rip backdoor. And I mean, they just crush teams over and over again with that action. So he moves without the basketball. He can shoot off movement. Two-way player. You can see him you can play him with Zion. You can see him staying on the court in a playoff scenario. I just, why can't he be a Mikal Bridges type guy? You know what I mean? Like, why can't he be something like that? We'll see. I mean, Bridges is such a good defender. I don't know if Murphy's quite there. We'll see. But the 3-point shooting is real. The off-ball movement is real. I believe in Trey Murphy, and I think he's going to be a good player. And it's just crazy to see how quickly this happened, how quickly it went from he's redshirting to, oh, he's playing, to, oh, he's starting, to, oh, can you imagine this guy not on the court for Virginia, to, okay, he's trying out the draft waters, to like, oh, he's probably a first-round pick, to like, he's 3 spots outside the lottery come draft day. And like, looks like he's going to be a really, really important piece for New Orleans going forward, which is exciting.
Very exciting. Brian, I appreciate you stopping by. We had some technical difficulties to start, but we appreciate you sticking around and showing the resiliency.
That's right.
What you're going to get from Brian Geisinger. So at @bgeis_bird on Twitter. Go give him a follow for the excellent Hornets content. Brian, thanks so much. Also, before we go, make sure that you check out our YouTube channel, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Leave that rate and review. Subscribe, drop a comment, drop a like, all of that good stuff. And once again, Pelicans Plus is brought to you by Hornitos. Hornitos is the official tequila of Pelicans Plus and Boot Crew Media. So once again, folks, I am Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter. Thanks so much for tuning in today. This was Pelicans Plus.